When you're new to riding, you're desperate for advice. You soak up everything: books, forums, instructors, YouTube tutorials, even that sketchy guy at the gas station with a beard and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. Sure, a lot of that advice is well-meaning, but here's the hard truth. Some of the worst riding habits out there start with good advice from someone who doesn't actually ride in the real world, or hasn't updated their thinking since 1982. That's what we're diving into today. This isn't about nitpicking. It's about busting myths that are still being repeated as if they're universal truth. Because smart riding isn't about blindly following every tip you hear. It's about knowing which ones to question. Number 1. Always lay the bike down if you're gonna crash. If you've spent any time around old school riders or outdated safety instructors, you've probably heard this gem. If you know you're gonna crash, lay the bike down. And for some reason, people keep repeating it like it's ancient biker wisdom. Here's the truth. It's not just bad advice. It's horrible advice. The logic behind this idea comes from a time when bikes had drum brakes, awful tires, and zero ABS. Back then, sliding on your side might have felt safer than locking up and flying over the bars. But we're not in the 1970s anymore. Today's bikes have incredible braking power, better traction control, and more stopping distance than ever before, if you know how to use them. Intentionally dumping your bike means giving up all control. You can't steer, you can't brake, and you're turning yourself into a projectile. You're no longer avoiding danger, you're guaranteeing injury. 9 times out of 10, you'd be better off staying upright, squeezing the brakes properly, and maneuvering around the hazard. Crashing is bad enough. Don't make it worse by choosing to fall. Laying it down isn't a skill. It's an excuse that people use to cover up poor braking or panic reactions. Ride smarter, trust your bike, and keep the rubber side down as long as humanly possible. Number 2. Don't use the front brake, it's dangerous. This one gets repeated so often it's practically motorcycle folklore. Be careful with that front brake, it'll flip you over. Some even say you should avoid using it entirely. And sure, if you grab the front lever like you're yanking a slot machine, you're gonna have a bad time. But saying you should avoid it altogether, that's like telling someone to drive a car using only the parking brake. Here's the truth. Your front brake is the most powerful tool you've got for stopping quickly. On most bikes, it does about 70 to 90% of the total stopping work. Ignoring it doesn't make you safer. It just means you'll take way longer to stop, and that can get you hurt or killed, especially in an emergency. Fear of the front brake usually comes from outdated training or people who had a bad experience because they never actually learned how to use it correctly. Smooth application, progressive pressure, that's how you stop fast without flipping. And guess what? Modern bikes with ABS make it even safer, giving you more room for error than ever before. Treating the front brake like it's radioactive is one of the quickest ways to stay a beginner forever. If you want to ride like someone who actually knows what they're doing, you need to master that lever, not avoid it like a curse. Number 3. Ride like you're invisible. On the surface, this one sounds like smart advice. Ride like you're invisible. The idea is that you shouldn't assume cars can see you because often they can't. That's a solid mindset for staying cautious. But here's where the problem kicks in. Too many riders take this advice literally and start riding as if they're ghosts floating through traffic, assuming there's nothing they can do to be seen. They avoid using their horn. They don't position themselves for visibility. They stay in blind spots because it doesn't matter, I'm invisible anyway. That's not strategy. That's surrender. You're not a ninja on a stealth mission. You're a human being on 2 wheels surrounded by distracted, half-asleep drivers. If you act like you're invisible, you will be invisible, and that's when things go sideways. The smarter approach is riding like you're unseen, but trying to be seen. Maximize visibility. Use lane position, high-vis gear, your lights, even body movement. Make eye contact with drivers. Tap the brakes to flash your light. Honk when needed. You're not trying to be a shadow. You're trying to get noticed without assuming you always are. Yes, don't depend on being seen, but also don't act like it's hopeless. Visibility is something you create, not something you give up on. Number 4. You have to put both feet down at stops. This one gets pushed hard in some beginner classes like it's some kind of holy rule. When you come to a stop, put both feet down. Supposedly it's safer, more balanced, more stable, but if you actually watch experienced riders in the real world, you'll notice something. They almost never do this. Why? Because it's completely unnecessary and, in some cases, can actually make things worse. Putting both feet down means you have to shift your weight off the rear brake, usually while the bike's still settling. That little move can throw off your balance or even cause the bike to rock forward if you're not steady. Most importantly, it trains you to think you need to stabilize the bike with your legs instead of your clutch, throttle, and brake control. The smarter habit is to keep your right foot covering the rear brake and only put your left foot down. That gives you control if the bike starts to roll, and it preps you for a smoother takeoff, especially on hills. It's what most skilled riders do and becomes second nature once you're comfortable handling the bike's weight. Sure, if you're on uneven ground or holding a passenger, dropping both feet can make sense. But doing it every time just because is like using training wheels forever. Learn balance. Learn brake control. You're not a tripod. You're a rider. Number 5. Only use the rear brake at low speeds. This one gets repeated so often it sounds like gospel. At slow speeds, just use your rear brake. And yes, there's some hidden truth in that statement. Emphasis on some. But when people take it too literally, it turns into a bad habit that messes with your control and balance, especially in slow, tight situations like U-turns or parking lots. The rear brake is definitely useful at slow speeds. It smooths things out, keeps the bike from lurching, and helps with stability. But the key word is blend, not replace. The idea that you should never touch the front brake below 10 miles an hour is just plain wrong. In fact, there's plenty of situations where a touch of front brake is exactly what you need to settle the suspension and keep things under control. Plus, if you train yourself to completely ignore the front brake anytime you're riding slow, you're setting up a bad reflex. When things get sketchy and you need to stop suddenly, even at low speeds, you'll hesitate or go straight for the rear, which may not be enough. A better habit? Use both brakes, even at low speeds, but modulate carefully. The front isn't evil, it just requires finesse. Don't cripple your skills because someone told you to treat your right hand like it's cursed. Number 6. The rear brake is useless, forget about it. Now here's the other extreme. You got one crowd saying only use the rear at low speeds, and then you got the self-declared experts who say, the rear brake is useless, don't even bother with it. And then this one gets pushed by sport bike guys, track day junkies, or anyone trying to look like Rossi on a Tuesday. But out here in the real world, where there are potholes, traffic, rain, gravel, and surprise squirrels, rear brake is absolutely not useless, it's essential. The rear brake helps stabilize the bike during braking. It's especially helpful on downhill stops, slow-speed maneuvers, tight U-turns, and even emergency situations when you're upright but need to stop without risking a front wheel slide. Used properly, the rear brake complements the front. It doesn't replace it or just sit there collecting dust. The problem is, most riders either overuse it or completely ignore it, and both habits are bad. You want balanced braking, each wheel doing its share depending on the conditions. Saying the rear brake is useless is like saying you don't need rear tires because the front ones do all the steering. It's a half-truth that becomes dangerous when taken literally. So yeah, if you're dragging it mid-corner and stomping on it like you're crushing bugs, that's bad. But using it smoothly, that's smart riding. Don't amputate half your stopping power just to look cool. Number 7. Downshifting is better than braking. This one's been floating around for decades, especially from old school riders and car people. Use your gears to slow down, it's better for control. And sure, engine braking has its place, but if you're relying on downshifting instead of using your actual brakes, you're doing it wrong and dangerously. Brakes are for stopping, that's what they're designed to do. They give you consistent, reliable deceleration. Gears are for acceleration and managing power, not for replacing your front and rear brake systems. Downshifting to slow down wears your clutch and transmission faster. And if you're sloppy with your rev matching, it can destabilize the bike, especially mid-corner. Some riders develop the bad habit of skipping brake input entirely and just banging through gears when approaching a light or a corner. Not only does that take longer to stop, but it also leaves you with less control and more risk if something unexpected happens. You can't stop quickly if you're too busy trying to match revs and hoping your rear wheel doesn't lock up. A better approach? Combine both. Use your brakes for stopping and downshifting to match your speed to the right gear once you're slowing down. It's smoother, safer, and way easier on your bike. Downshifting only is fine for the track or engine braking on a long downhill, but as a stopping method, it's outdated, inefficient, and asking for trouble. Number 8. Always ride in the left or right tire track, never in the middle. If you took a safety course, you've probably been told to ride in either the left or right wheel track of the lane, because the middle is supposedly coated in oil and debris. And that used to be pretty solid advice, back when every car on the road leaked oil like it was mandatory. But these days, that never ride in the middle rule has become another outdated mantra that doesn't always match reality. Modern cars don't leak nearly as much oil, and road maintenance has improved in most areas. Yeah, there's still some greasy spots in the center lane, especially at intersections. But treating the entire middle of every lane like it's an oil slick from Mario Kart is just paranoid. In some cases, the middle offers the best view of traffic ahead, the most escape options, and the smoothest surface. The key is to scan and adapt. Look at the actual road conditions. If there's a shiny patch in the center, avoid it. But if it's clean and gives you better sight lines, more room from other vehicles, and better spacing in traffic, use it. Locking yourself into only one lane position makes you predictable, and predictability isn't always safe when everyone else on the road is unpredictable. Ride smart, not rigid. Position yourself where you're most visible and safest in that moment, not where an outdated rule says you should be. Number 9. The faster you go, the safer you are. This one sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, but a surprising number of riders actually believe it. It's usually dressed up as something like, speed keeps you ahead of traffic, or if you ride faster, you'll stay out of danger. And while there's a sliver of truth in the idea that momentum can help you flow with traffic, using that as an excuse to speed all the time is straight up dangerous. Let's be clear, speed reduces your reaction time, increases your stopping distance, and makes every mistake more expensive. You have less time to respond, less room to maneuver, and less chance of walking away when something goes wrong. Riding faster than traffic might give you a brief sense of control, but it also makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability gets riders killed. The worst part is how this idea gets passed off as advanced wisdom. You'll hear veteran riders say things like, "I never let cars catch up to me," or "You gotta ride faster to stay out of their blind spots." But there are better ways to do that, like smart lane positioning, good spacing, and actual awareness. Speed should be a tool to use when needed, not your default setting. If your survival strategy depends on going faster than everyone else, you're not safer. You're just gambling with worse odds. Number 10. Counter steering is too complicated. Just lean and the bike will turn. This one right here might be the sneakiest trap of them all. A lot of instructors try to simplify things for beginners, which makes sense. But somewhere along the way, just lean to turn became the default explanation for how motorcycles steer. And while it's not completely wrong, it's dangerously incomplete. Here's the real deal. At any speed above a walking pace, leaning alone won't do much. You want the bike to turn? You need to counter steer. That means pushing on the handlebar in the opposite direction you want to go. You want to turn left? Gently push on the left bar. That slight input tips the bike into the lean, and then physics take over and the bike carves through the turn. It's not complicated once you feel it, but if nobody tells you about it, you'll never understand why your bike feels sluggish or unresponsive. Saying just lean without explaining countersteering leaves beginners confused, especially in emergency situations. They try to dodge an obstacle by leaning harder and harder, and nothing happens. That's how crashes occur, not from a lack of reaction time, but from a fundamental misunderstanding of how bikes steer. Every rider should understand countersteering. It's not just some racer technique. It's the technique for staying alive when the road throws something at you fast. Ignore it, and you're just guessing with the handlebars. You're right, I already covered both of those earlier in the script. Thanks for the catch. Let's fix that properly with 2 brand new original bad riding tips that haven't been covered yet and aren't duplicates. Number 11. Keep your feet down while moving slowly. You'll sometimes hear this one from well-meaning beginners giving each other bad tips, or from riders who never truly learn proper low-speed control. They'll say things like, if you're nervous at slow speeds, just keep your feet down to balance, like walking the bike along. And yeah, it feels safer, especially when you're still getting used to the clutch and throttle. But in reality, it's a crutch that builds terrible habits. Keeping your feet down while moving actually puts you off balance, limits your steering input, and makes you less stable, not more. It also delays your ability to react if something happens in front of you because you're focused on waddling instead of riding. You're not training yourself to handle the bike, you're just delaying the learning curve. What you should be doing is practicing clutch control, using the rear brake for balance, and keeping your feet on the pegs unless you're actually stopping. That's how you build real confidence and control, especially during U-turns, tight parking lot moves, or traffic crawls. If you rely on your feet to stabilize the bike at low speeds, you'll never trust your own throttle or braking skills, and that'll bite you later. Putting your feet down is for stopping. If the bike is moving, your feet belong on the pegs. Always. Number 12. Always ride in first gear in slow traffic. Another classic beginner trap. You're in slow traffic, stop and go, and someone tells you, stay in first gear so you're ready to move. Sounds reasonable, right? But staying in first gear for extended stretches of crawling traffic can actually make things harder, not easier, and it can put unnecessary wear on your clutch and your sanity. The problem with riding in first gear at very low speeds is that it's twitchy. Even the slightest throttle input can make the bike lurch forward, which causes most riders to ride the clutch constantly to smooth things out. That builds heat, wears your clutch plates, and makes your hand cramp up. It's also harder to modulate speed smoothly, especially when traffic is inching along just a little faster than walking pace. The smarter option? Slip into second gear when you can. Calms the throttle, gives you smoother power delivery, and reduces clutch abuse. If you're barely moving at all, consider feathering the clutch in second instead of dragging it in first. Your bike and your left hand will thank you. Staying ready to move is smart, but riding in first gear the whole time isn't the only way to do it. Adapt your gear selection to your speed, not your fear. The problem with bad riding advice is that it doesn't always sound bad. In fact, some of it sounds downright wise, until you realize it's based on outdated bikes, misunderstood physics, or passed down nonsense that no one ever bothered to question. And once it gets drilled into a beginner's head, it becomes habit. The kind that's hard to shake and dangerous to keep. Smart riding isn't about memorizing rules. It's about understanding your machine, your environment, and your own limits. That means questioning the advice you get, even if it comes from an expert, especially if it sounds like something that hasn't evolved since rotary phones. So whether you're a new rider trying to figure it all out or someone who's been doing it for years and just realized you've been riding with one foot on a myth, don't be afraid to relearn. That's not weakness, that's growth. What's the worst riding advice you've ever heard? Drop it in the comments. I guarantee someone else out there has heard it too.